Picture this. You're scrolling through endless YouTube videos at 2 a.m. Your brain craving something familiar yet fascinating to drift off to. Well, buckle up because I've got a treasure trove of Family Guy secrets that'll either help you sleep peacefully or keep you wide awake wondering how this animated chaos machine actually works. From behind-the-scenes drama to mind-bending production facts, these random tidbits about the Griffin family will give your brain exactly what it needs for that perfect sleepy time content. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right off the bat. The voice of Stewie Griffin, that diabolical baby genius we all know and love, is performed by the show's creator, Seth MacFarlane himself. But here's the kicker that most people don't realize. MacFarlane originally based Stewie's voice on the legendary actor Rex Harrison, who played Professor Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady. That posh, sophisticated British accent that makes Stewie sound like he stepped out of a Victorian manor. It's basically a baby doing an impression of a 1,960 seconds Broadway star. The irony is delicious when you think about it. This character who spends half his time plotting world domination is essentially channeling a musical theater legend. Now, if you think that's wild, wait until you hear about the show's near-death experience that almost prevented it from becoming the cultural phenomenon we know today. Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and for a hot minute there, it looked like the Griffin family was done for good. But then something magical happened that literally brought the show back from the dead. DVD sales and Adult Swim reruns created such a massive fan following that Fox had no choice but to resurrect it in 2005. It's like the show became a zombie that refused to stay buried, clawing its way back to life through sheer fan devotion. The creation story of Family Guy itself reads like something out of a fever dream. Seth MacFarlane was just 24 years old when he pitched the show to Fox, making him one of the youngest people ever to create and run their own animated series for a major network. He literally animated the entire pilot episode by himself, spending months hunched over a desk drawing frame after frame while surviving on probably nothing but coffee and determination. The original pitch was actually inspired by his college thesis film called The Life of Larry, which featured a middle-aged man with a talking dog. Sound familiar? That little student film eventually evolved into the multi-million-dollar empire we know today. Speaking of that talking dog, Brian Griffin holds a special place in animation history for reasons you probably never considered. Unlike most cartoon pets who remain perpetually animal-like, Brian is essentially a human character who just happens to be a dog. He drives cars, drinks martinis, writes novels, and engages in complex philosophical debates. MacFarlane has stated that Brian represents his own voice in the show more than any other character, which explains why the dog often serves as the moral compass of the family. It's basically MacFarlane having conversations with himself through a talking animal, which, when you think about it, is either brilliant or slightly concerning. The show's controversial humor didn't emerge by accident. It was a carefully calculated rebellion against traditional family sitcoms. MacFarlane deliberately set out to create the anti-Simpsons, something that would push every boundary the Simpsons wouldn't touch. Where the Simpsons used gentle satire and heartwarming family moments, Family Guy went nuclear with shock, humor, and deliberately offensive content. The cutaway gags, those random flashback sequences that became the show's signature, were originally MacFarlane's solution to a problem he had with traditional sitcom pacing. He wanted to break free from the constraints of linear storytelling and create something that felt more like channel surfing through a fever dream. Here's a production detail that'll make you appreciate the craft behind the chaos. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 10 months to complete, from initial script to final animation. That means the episodes you're watching right now were being worked on almost a year ago. The animation process alone involves hundreds of artists working across multiple studios, with the initial designs created in California before being sent overseas for full animation. It's like a massive international relay race, where each handoff has to be perfect or the whole episode falls apart. The voice acting sessions are apparently legendary affairs that sound more like comedy improv shows than traditional recording sessions. MacFarlane voices not just Stewie, but also Brian, Peter, and Glenn Quagmire, often having entire conversations with himself in the recording booth. The other voice actors have described watching him switch between characters mid-sentence as both impressive and slightly unsettling. Imagine seeing someone argue with themselves in 4 different voices while maintaining perfect character consistency. It's basically like watching a one-man theater performance in real time. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's production is how the writer's room operates. Unlike many animated shows that plan seasons far in advance, Family Guy's writing process is notoriously chaotic and last-minute. Writers have described sessions where entire episodes get scrapped days before animation begins, leading to frantic rewrites and sleepless nights. This seat-of-the-pants approach actually contributes to the show's unpredictable energy, but it also means that voice actors sometimes receive new scripts literally hours before recording sessions. The show's relationship with censorship has been a constant dance between pushing boundaries and avoiding network wrath. Family Guy has developed an almost scientific approach to testing limits, deliberately writing jokes that are slightly more offensive than what they actually want to air, knowing that network censors will demand cuts. The final version that reaches viewers is often the writer's actual intended content, achieved through strategic overwriting and negotiation. It's psychological warfare, disguised as comedy writing. McFarlane's musical background plays a much larger role in the show than most people realize. Before creating Family Guy, he was actually a jazz vocalist and pianist, which explains the numerous musical numbers scattered throughout episodes. Those elaborate song and dance sequences aren't just random comedy bits. They're genuine musical theater productions compressed into cartoon format. McFarlane has stated that he views Family Guy as partly a variety show, using the Griffin family as a framework to showcase different types of entertainment within each episode. The character designs themselves tell an interesting story about animation philosophy. Notice how the Griffin family members all have distinctly different body shapes and facial structures, unlike many cartoon families where everyone looks like variations of the same template. Peter's round, doughy appearance was specifically designed to contrast with Lois's sharp, angular features, while Stewie's football-shaped head was meant to make him instantly recognizable even in silhouette. These design choices weren't arbitrary. They were carefully calculated to ensure each character would be visually distinct even in crowded scenes or quick cuts. Here's something that'll change how you watch the show forever. The infamous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned as recurring segments. The first chicken fight was supposed to be a one-off gag, but the animation team had so much fun creating the over-the-top action sequence that it became a running theme. Those elaborate, destruction-filled battles that seem to last forever? They're essentially the animation team showing off their action sequence skills in a comedy show, like flexing creative muscles that don't usually get exercised in traditional sitcom animation. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars is uniquely twisted compared to other animated series. While most cartoons treat celebrity appearances as special events, with the famous person playing themselves or a character clearly meant to be them, Family Guy often buries celebrity voices in minor roles without any fanfare. A-list actors will voice background characters for single lines, and viewers might never realize they just heard a famous person deliver a throwaway joke. It's the entertainment industry equivalent of hiding expensive ingredients in cheap fast food. Family Guy's international versions reveal fascinating cultural differences in humor. In some countries, entire episodes have been rewritten because the original jokes simply don't translate, not just linguistically, but culturally. What Americans find hilarious might be completely incomprehensible to audiences in other parts of the world, leading to localized versions that are essentially different shows with the same characters. It's like each country gets its own flavor of the Griffin family chaos, tailored to local sensibilities. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy extends into some surprisingly niche markets. Beyond the obvious t-shirts and DVDs, there are Family Guy-themed wine collections, luxury watches, and even high-end collectible sculptures that cost thousands of dollars. The show that built its reputation on lowbrow humor has somehow spawned upscale merchandise that wouldn't look out of place in expensive boutiques. It's cultural cognitive dissonance at its finest. The writing staff includes people from incredibly diverse backgrounds: former stand-up comedians, Harvard graduates, television veterans, and complete newcomers to the industry. This mix creates a unique creative environment where highbrow intellectual humor crashes into street-level comedy instincts. The result is a show that can reference obscure philosophical concepts in one scene and make fart jokes in the next, often within the same episode. Animation errors in Family Guy have become something of a cult fascination among fans. Unlike other shows that try to hide mistakes, Family Guy occasionally leaves obvious animation goofs in the final product, either intentionally, as Easter eggs, or because the production schedule doesn't allow for fixes. These errors have spawned online communities dedicated to spotting and cataloging every miscolored character, floating object, or impossible perspective. It's accidental, interactive entertainment, where viewers become detectives hunting for visual inconsistencies. The show's theme song, that bouncy piano melody everyone knows by heart, was originally much longer and included additional verses that were cut for time. The full version tells a more complete story about the Griffin family's dynamics, but network television's rigid timing requirements forced it down to the bare essentials. MacFarlane has occasionally performed the complete version at live concerts, giving fans a glimpse of what could have been the opening sequence if television had more flexible formatting. Voice acting for animated shows requires a completely different skill set than live-action performance, and Family Guy pushes these demands to extremes. The actors often need to deliver lines while laughing, crying, or even while their characters are supposed to be eating, fighting, or running. This means recording sessions frequently involve voice actors doing physical comedy performances in sound booths, acting out entire scenes with just their voices, while making exaggerated facial expressions that no one will ever see, but that somehow make the vocal performance more authentic. The show's relationship with current events creates unique production challenges. Because episodes take months to complete, jokes about contemporary issues often feel dated by the time they air, leading to a complex balancing act between topical relevance and timeless humor. Writers have developed strategies for creating content that feels current without being tied to specific news cycles, though sometimes they get caught off guard when major events happen during production and their carefully planned episodes suddenly seem tone-deaf or prescient in ways they never intended. Family Guy's influence on internet culture extends far beyond just memes and viral videos. The show's cutaway gag structure essentially predicted how people would consume media in the social media age. Short, disconnected bursts of content that don't require following a linear narrative. Those seemingly random flashbacks that interrupt the main story? They're basically the television equivalent of scrolling through TikTok or Twitter, jumping from one unrelated thought to another without warning. The economics behind Family Guy reveal interesting insights into how modern television actually works. Despite being an animated show with relatively high production costs, it's incredibly profitable because animated content doesn't age the same way live-action shows do. There are no aging actors demanding higher salaries, no physical sets that deteriorate, and no location shoots that become impossible due to changing landscapes. The Griffin family can theoretically exist forever without any of the logistical problems that eventually kill most television series. Behind all the controversy and chaos, Family Guy operates like a massive creative experiment in pushing the boundaries of what television can be. Every episode is essentially asking the question, what if we tried this completely ridiculous thing and somehow made it work within the framework of a family sitcom? Sometimes the experiments fail spectacularly, but when they succeed, they create moments of television that are genuinely unlike anything else on the air. The show has created its own internal mythology that's become increasingly complex over the years. Character relationships, running gags, and callback references have built up layers of continuity that reward longtime viewers while potentially confusing newcomers. It's like a secret club where the membership requirement is having watched hundreds of hours of animated chaos, and the reward is understanding jokes that are incomprehensible to everyone else. And here's perhaps the most interesting fact about Family Guy. Despite all its success and cultural impact, the show remains fundamentally unpredictable. After more than 2 decades on the air, it can still surprise viewers with completely unexpected creative choices, bizarre guest appearances, or experimental episodes that break its own established rules. In a television landscape increasingly dominated by formulaic content, Family Guy maintains a chaotic creativity that keeps audiences guessing what might happen next. So there you have it, a deep dive into the wonderfully weird world behind one of television's most controversial animated families. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or staying wide awake in fascination, these facts reveal just how much complexity hides behind what appears to be simple cartoon chaos. Sweet dreams, and remember, in the Griffin household, normal is just another word for boring. Picture this: you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and your brain is buzzing with the day's chaos. You need something familiar, something comforting, something that'll help you drift off into peaceful sleep. Well, tonight we're diving into the wonderfully weird world of Quahog with some random Family Guy facts that'll ease you into dreamland. So grab your favorite pillow, get cozy, and let me tell you some fascinating tidbits about America's most dysfunctional animated family that might just surprise you. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Fox executives thought the ratings weren't strong enough to justify keeping it alive. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim. The DVD sales were so phenomenal that they broke records for animated series at the time. Fans were buying up seasons faster than Peter could down a beer at the Drunken Clam. This unprecedented demand from home video sales convinced Fox to bring the show back in 2005, making it one of the first series ever to be resurrected primarily due to DVD performance. The voice behind Peter Griffin, Seth MacFarlane, actually does most of his recording sessions incredibly quickly. While many voice actors take hours to perfect their performances, MacFarlane can knock out an entire episode's worth of dialogue in about 2 hours. That's pretty impressive when you consider he voices not just Peter, but also Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. His rapid recording style comes from his background in radio, where timing and efficiency were absolutely crucial. MacFarlane developed his distinctive character voices during his college years at the Rhode Island School of Design, where he actually created an early version of Family Guy as his senior thesis project. Speaking of voices, here's something that might keep you pondering as you fall asleep. Stewie's accent isn't actually British. Seth MacFarlane has explained that Stewie's voice is meant to be a sort of generic upper-class accent that could come from anywhere. It's a theatrical, affected way of speaking that's supposed to make Stewie sound sophisticated and pretentious, regardless of geographic origin. The inspiration came from old Hollywood actors and theater performers who adopted similar speech patterns to sound more refined. The character of Glenn Quagmire has one of the most disturbing backstories in animated television, though it's mostly revealed through throwaway gags and quick references. His middle name is apparently Quentin, and he's supposedly been a pilot since the 1960 seconds, which would make him significantly older than he appears. The show has hinted that he's been involved in various historical events, always in morally questionable ways. His famous catchphrase, "giggity," wasn't actually in the original character design. It evolved naturally during Seth MacFarlane's recording sessions and became so popular with the writers that they started incorporating it into more and more episodes. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. The Griffin family's house layout is incredibly consistent throughout the series. The writers and animators keep detailed floor plans to ensure that rooms connect properly from episode to episode. This level of continuity is actually quite rare in animated sitcoms, where houses often seem to have magical expanding and contracting rooms depending on what the plot needs. The Griffin house is based on an actual home in Cranston, Rhode Island, though it's been modified significantly for animation purposes. Brian's character has evolved dramatically since the show's early days. Originally, he was written as more of a straight man to Peter's antics, serving as the voice of reason in the household. However, as the series progressed, the writers began exploring Brian's flaws more deeply. His pretentiousness, his drinking problem, his romantic failures, and his writing aspirations all became major character traits. This evolution reflects Seth MacFarlane's own growth as a writer and his willingness to make his characters more complex and sometimes less likable. The show's cultural impact extends far beyond television screens. Family Guy has influenced internet meme culture in ways that few other shows can claim. The Roadhouse cutaway gag became a popular meme format years before most people even knew what memes were. The "oh no" moments, the chicken fights, and countless other Family Guy references have become part of online vernacular. This digital footprint has helped keep the show relevant with younger audiences who might discover it through social media rather than traditional television viewing. One of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy's production is how cutaway gags are created. The writers have a separate room where they brainstorm completely random, unrelated jokes that can be inserted into episodes when needed. These gags are often written months before they're actually used, and they're stored in a database that writers can search through when they need to fill time or add comedy to a scene. This system allows for the show's signature non-sequitur humor, while maintaining a consistent production schedule. The character of Meg has been voiced by 2 different actors, though most viewers probably never noticed the change. Lacey Chabert voiced Meg during the first season, but Mila Kunis took over starting in season 2. The transition was so seamless that it barely registered with audiences. Mila Kunis has mentioned in interviews that she initially tried to match Lacey Chabert's interpretation of the character, but eventually developed her own approach. Interestingly, Kunis was also voicing Jackie Burkhardt on That 70 Seconds show at the same time, showcasing her range as a voice actor. Family Guy's relationship with censorship has been fascinating to observe over the years. The show has pushed boundaries consistently, sometimes getting away with content that surprises even longtime viewers. However, there are also episodes that have been banned or heavily edited for various reasons. The censorship battles have actually become part of the show's identity, with Seth MacFarlane and the writers often incorporating discussions about censorship directly into episodes. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars is uniquely irreverent. Unlike many animated series that treat celebrity appearances as special events, Family Guy often has famous people, voice characters, who are immediately killed off or humiliated in some way. This approach reflects the show's general irreverence towards celebrity culture and its willingness to bite the hand that feeds it. Many celebrities have appeared on the show specifically because they wanted to be made fun of, which says something interesting about the show's cultural position. Here's something that might surprise you. Family Guy has actually won several Emmy nominations and awards over the years. While it's often dismissed as lowbrow humor, the show has been recognized for its voice acting, animation, and music. Seth MacFarlane's musical numbers, in particular, have received critical acclaim. His background in musical theater shows through in episodes featuring elaborate song and dance sequences, which often rival those found in major animated films. The show's international versions are fascinating studies in cultural adaptation. Different countries have had to handle the show's content in various ways, sometimes changing jokes entirely to make them relevant to local audiences. In some cases, entire episodes have been restructured because certain references or situations don't translate across cultural boundaries. These international versions offer interesting insights into how humor travels, or doesn't travel, across different societies. Family Guy's merchandise empire is surprisingly extensive and eclectic. Beyond the typical t-shirts and action figures, there have been Family Guy board games, cookbooks, and even meditation guides. The show's merchandising success demonstrates how deeply it has penetrated popular culture. Fans don't just watch Family Guy, they incorporate it into various aspects of their lives through products that extend the show's universe into the real world. The writing process for Family Guy involves what the staff calls manatee balls, a reference to a South Park episode that made fun of Family Guy's writing style. The writers actually embraced this criticism and lean into the randomness that South Park was mocking. They've developed systems for generating increasingly absurd combinations of references, situations, and characters. This self-aware approach to their own writing style has become part of the show's meta-humor. Seth MacFarlane's other projects have often served as testing grounds for Family Guy concepts. The Orville, his science fiction series, actually uses some of the same character dynamics and humor styles that he developed for Family Guy, just in a different setting. Similarly, American Dad and The Cleveland Show served as laboratories where different aspects of the Family Guy formula could be explored and refined. The show's relationship with current events is complex and ever-evolving. Family Guy often references things that happened months before episodes air due to production schedules, but the writers have developed techniques for keeping the show feeling current. They've also mastered the art of making jokes that feel timeless, even when they're about very specific cultural moments. One aspect of Family Guy that often goes unnoticed is its sophisticated understanding of animation history. The show regularly pays homage to classic animation styles, from Disney to Warner Brothers to obscure experimental films. These references serve multiple purposes. They demonstrate the creator's deep knowledge of their medium. They provide visual variety, and they create inside jokes for animation enthusiasts. The show's impact on other animated series cannot be overstated. Family Guy's success opened doors for more adult-oriented animated programming and influenced the humor styles of countless other shows. Its willingness to break the fourth wall, its pop culture reference density, and its approach to controversial topics have all been adopted and adapted by other animated series. As you drift off to sleep, consider this. Family Guy represents a unique moment in television history, where traditional broadcast standards, internet culture, and animation technology all converge to create something entirely new. The show emerged just as DVD sales were becoming important, just as internet memes were developing, and just as animation technology was becoming sophisticated enough to support rapid production schedules. The voice actors have developed such strong relationships with their characters that they often improvise during recording sessions. These improvisations frequently make it into the final episodes, adding spontaneity to what could otherwise be very controlled animation. The chemistry between voice actors, even when they're recording separately, comes through in the final product in ways that feel natural and unforced. Family Guy's legacy will likely be its demonstration that animated television could be both commercially successful and artistically ambitious while maintaining an irreverent, anti-establishment attitude. It proved that audiences were hungry for content that didn't talk down to them, that referenced the full spectrum of popular culture, and that wasn't afraid to offend or surprise. So as you close your eyes tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, someone is discovering Family Guy for the first time. Someone else is rewatching their favorite episode, and the creators are probably working on new ways to surprise, shock, and entertain audiences. In the grand tradition of animated comedy, Family Guy continues to push boundaries, challenge expectations, and remind us that sometimes the most comforting thing about entertainment is its complete unpredictability. Sweet dreams, and remember, tomorrow is another day in Quahog, where anything can happen, and usually does. Hey there, night owls and Family Guy fanatics. If you're scrolling through YouTube at 3 in the morning looking for something to help you drift off to dreamland, you've stumbled upon the perfect video. Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes completely unhinged world of Family Guy with some truly wild facts that'll either lull you to sleep or keep you wide awake wondering how Seth MacFarlane's mind actually works. So grab your favorite blanket, dim those lights, and let's explore the wonderfully weird universe of Quahog, Rhode Island. Trust me, by the end of this journey through Family Guy's most fascinating secrets, you'll either be peacefully snoozing or have a whole new appreciation for just how crazy this show really gets. Let's start with something that might blow your mind. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? Yeah, you heard that right. The show first got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and Fox thought they were done with the Griffin family forever. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The ratings were so incredible that Fox literally had to eat humble pie and bring the show back in 2005. Then, believe it or not, they canceled it again in 2007, only to reverse that decision just months later. Talk about a roller coaster relationship between a network and a show. Speaking of relationships, let's talk about the voice behind our favorite talking baby, Stewie Griffin. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice Stewie, he also voices Brian, Peter, Glenn Quagmire, and several other characters. But here's the kicker. MacFarlane based Stewie's voice on the accent of English actor Rex Harrison, who you might know from the classic musical My Fair Lady. Yeah, that sophisticated, slightly pompous British accent that makes Stewie sound like an evil mastermind. It's straight from a Broadway legend. MacFarlane has said in interviews that he wanted Stewie to sound like an old-school English gentleman, which makes it even funnier when this supposedly refined character is plotting world domination from his crib. Now, if you think the show pushes boundaries on television, you should hear about some of the stuff that never made it to air. The writers and animators have created countless scenes, jokes, and entire storylines that were deemed too controversial even for Family Guy's standards. And considering what does make it onto television, that's really saying something. There's apparently an entire vault of unused content that could probably fill several seasons worth of episodes. Some of these rejected bits have made their way onto DVD releases as deleted scenes, but many remain locked away forever, too wild even for the show known for having no limits. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's production process. Unlike many animated series that plan out entire seasons in advance, Family Guy often operates more like a live-action sitcom. The writers frequently come up with ideas on the spot, and episodes are sometimes completely rewritten just weeks before they're supposed to air. This spontaneous approach explains why the show can feel so fresh and unpredictable, but it also leads to some pretty intense crunch times for the animation team. Imagine trying to animate complex scenes with just days to spare before broadcast. Let's dive into some character secrets that most fans never realize. Brian the dog. everyone's favorite intellectual canine, was originally supposed to be just a regular pet. In the original concept, Brian was going to be a typical dog who couldn't talk and would just bark and fetch like any normal household pet. Seth MacFarlane decided to make him a talking character at the last minute, and thank goodness he did, because Brian's philosophical conversations and sarcastic wit have become some of the show's most memorable moments. It's wild to think that one of the most complex characters almost didn't have a voice at all. The show's animation style has some fascinating secrets too. Those seemingly simple character designs actually take an enormous amount of work to create. Each character has hundreds of different facial expressions and poses that animators can mix and match. Stewie alone has over 300 different mouth positions just for speaking different sounds. The animators have to keep track of all these variations to maintain consistency across episodes. It's like having a massive digital puppet show where every single movement has to be carefully orchestrated. Here's a fact that might make you appreciate the show's music even more. Seth MacFarlane isn't just the creator, writer, and voice actor for multiple characters. He's also a legitimate recording artist who's released several albums of traditional pop standards. His musical background heavily influences the show, which is why you'll notice that Family Guy has more musical numbers than most animated comedies. Those elaborate song and dance sequences aren't just thrown in for laughs. They're crafted by someone who genuinely understands musical theater and classic American songbook traditions. The show's cultural impact goes way beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has actually influenced real-world events and conversations. Politicians have referenced the show in speeches. Academics have written scholarly papers about its social commentary, and it's been credited with introducing younger audiences to cultural references they might never have encountered otherwise. Think about how many classic movies, TV shows, songs, and historical events you first learned about through a Family Guy cutaway gag. The show serves as this weird cultural bridge between different generations of entertainment. Now let's talk about some of the show's most controversial episodes and why they're so memorable. The writers have never shied away from tackling sensitive subjects, and sometimes their approach has sparked genuine debates about comedy, censorship, and social responsibility. Some episodes have been pulled from rotation, others have been edited for different markets, and a few have become legendary among fans, specifically because they push things too far. This willingness to court controversy has kept Family Guy relevant for over 2 decades, even as television landscape has changed dramatically around it. The voice acting process for Family Guy is unlike anything you'd expect. Seth MacFarlane often records multiple characters in the same session, essentially having conversations with himself. He'll record Peter's lines, then immediately switch to Brian's voice to respond, then jump to Stewie for the next exchange. Watching him work in the recording booth is apparently like witnessing someone with multiple personality disorder having a very organized conversation with themselves. Other voice actors have said it's both impressive and slightly unsettling to watch. Here's something that connects to the show's longevity. Family Guy has aired over 400 episodes, making it one of the longest-running animated series in television history. To put that in perspective, if you watched every single episode back-to-back, you'd be sitting there for more than 150 hours straight. That's almost a full week of continuous Family Guy content. The show has literally created enough material to entertain someone for an entire week without sleeping, eating, or taking a single break. The show's international versions reveal some fascinating cultural differences. Family Guy is broadcast in dozens of countries, and each version has to navigate different censorship standards and cultural sensitivities. In some countries, entire jokes are replaced with completely different content. In others, characters' names are changed, and certain running gags are modified to make sense to local audiences. There are versions of Family Guy where the cultural references are so different that they're essentially completely different shows with the same characters. Let's explore some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans never hear about. Like any long-running show, Family Guy has had its share of creative disagreements, contract disputes, and personality conflicts. Seth MacFarlane has been very public about his occasional frustrations with the show, even stepping back from day-to-day involvement for several seasons. There have been disputes over storylines, character development, and the general direction of the show. Some former writers and voice actors have shared stories about heated arguments in writers' rooms and recording sessions that had to be stopped because of creative differences. The show's merchandising empire is absolutely massive, but some of the most interesting products never made it to market. There have been proposed Family Guy video games, theme park attractions, and even a planned Broadway musical that would have featured the Griffin family in live-action musical theater. The legal and logistical challenges of adapting animated characters for different mediums have killed dozens of potential projects over the years. Imagine walking through a Family Guy theme park, or watching actors in Peter and Lois costumes singing on Broadway. Here's a production secret that reveals how much work goes into each episode. A single 22-minute episode of Family Guy requires approximately 8 months to complete from initial concept to final broadcast. The process involves dozens of writers, voice actors, animators, sound engineers, and editors. Every single frame is reviewed multiple times. Every joke is analyzed and often rewritten. And every visual gag is carefully planned and executed. What looks like simple animation on screen represents thousands of hours of collaborative creative work. The show's relationship with censorship has created some legendary stories. There are episodes that exist in multiple versions, with different levels of content depending on when and where they're broadcast. The uncensored DVD versions of some episodes contain jokes and scenes that have never been seen on television. Meanwhile, daytime reruns are edited so heavily that some episodes are barely recognizable. The writers have learned to create content in layers, knowing that different versions will need different levels of editing for different audiences. Family Guy's influence on internet culture deserves its own discussion. The show has generated countless memes, viral videos, and online discussions. Certain episodes have become legendary specifically because of how they're shared and referenced online. The show's cutaway gag format translates perfectly to social media, where short, punchy jokes can be easily shared and remixed. Some Family Guy moments have become more famous as internet memes than they ever were as television content. The voice acting talent that has appeared on Family Guy reads like a who's who of entertainment. Celebrities often jump at the chance to appear on the show, sometimes playing themselves, sometimes voicing original characters. The guest star list includes everyone from major Hollywood actors to political figures to professional athletes. Some celebrities have become recurring characters, while others have appeared just once but created memorable moments that fans still talk about years later. Here's something that might change how you watch the show. Many of the seemingly random cutaway gags are actually carefully constructed references to specific movies, TV shows, or historical events. The writers spend considerable time researching these references to make sure they're accurate, even when they're being completely absurd. There are entire databases that catalog every cultural reference in every episode, and the depth of knowledge required to understand all the jokes is honestly staggering. The show's animation has evolved significantly over its run, but not always in ways you might expect. While the overall character designs have remained consistent, the background art, lighting effects, and scene composition have become much more sophisticated. Early episodes look almost primitive compared to recent ones, but the evolution has been so gradual that most viewers don't notice. Comparing the pilot episode to current episodes is like looking at completely different shows that happen to use the same characters. Family Guy's impact on other animated shows cannot be overstated. The success of Family Guy paved the way for countless other adult animated comedies, from American Dad to Rick and Morty to BoJack Horseman. The show proved that animated comedies could tackle adult themes and attract mature audiences, opening up an entire genre that barely existed before. Many current animators and writers cite Family Guy as a direct influence on their work and career choices. The show's approach to storytelling often breaks conventional narrative rules in fascinating ways. Episodes frequently abandon their main plots entirely for extended tangents. Characters regularly break the fourth wall to address the audience directly, and the show often parodies its own format and conventions. This meta approach to comedy requires a level of self-awareness that's rare in television, and it's part of what keeps longtime fans engaged, even after hundreds of episodes. As we wind down this journey through Family Guy's hidden world, it's worth reflecting on how a cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island became such a cultural phenomenon. The show succeeds because it taps into something fundamentally human about finding humor in chaos, about laughing at things that probably shouldn't be funny, and about the strange comfort of familiar characters behaving in completely unpredictable ways. Whether you're drifting off to sleep or wide awake thinking about animated comedy theory, Family Guy continues to surprise, offend, entertain, and occasionally enlighten its audience after more than 20 years on the air. The show's ability to constantly reinvent itself while maintaining its core identity is perhaps the most impressive fact of all. Sweet dreams. And remember, somewhere in Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into trouble that's even weirder than anything we've discussed tonight. The chaos never really stops. And somehow, that's exactly what makes it so perfect for helping restless minds finally find peace. Until next time, sleep tight and don't let the giant chicken nightmares bite. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 in the morning, and suddenly, you remember that time Peter Griffin literally married a cardboard cutout of himself. Welcome to the weird, wild world of Family Guy, where the most random facts are often the most fascinating ones. Tonight, we're diving deep into the strangest corners of Quahog, with facts so bizarre they'll either help you drift off to sleep or keep you awake, wondering how the writers even came up with this stuff. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind. Did you know that the original concept for Family Guy was completely different from what we got? Seth MacFarlane initially pitched the show as a much darker comedy about a dysfunctional family dealing with serious issues. The network executives were so confused by the pilot that they almost didn't pick it up. Thank goodness they did, because otherwise, we wouldn't have gems like the time Brian became a used car salesman and accidentally sold Death his own car. Speaking of Brian, here's a fact that might surprise you. The character was originally supposed to be much more of a background character, basically just the family pet who occasionally made sarcastic comments. But Seth MacFarlane loved voicing him so much that Brian gradually became one of the main characters. This explains why Brian's personality seems to evolve so dramatically throughout the early seasons. He went from being a simple talking dog to a pretentious intellectual with daddy issues and a drinking problem. Now let's talk about something truly random. The chicken fight scenes between Peter and Ernie the giant chicken weren't supposed to become a recurring gag. The first fight scene in the episode Da Boom was meant to be a one-off joke. But the animators had so much fun creating the elaborate fight sequence that they kept bringing it back. Each subsequent chicken fight got more elaborate and destructive, eventually involving helicopters, submarines, and entire city blocks being demolished. The longest chicken fight lasted nearly 4 minutes of screen time, which is practically an eternity in television comedy. Here's something that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every time you see the Griffin house, the layout is actually consistent throughout the series. The creators took the time to map out every room, every hallway, every closet in the house, so that when characters move around, it makes spatial sense. This is incredibly rare in animated comedies, where houses often have impossible layouts that change depending on what the joke requires. The Griffin House blueprints are actually available online, and fans have used them to build accurate replicas in video games and even real life. Moving on to character quirks. Did you know that Meg's unpopularity at school was originally supposed to be temporary? The writers planned to have her eventually find her place and become more confident, but the running gag of everyone treating Meg terribly became so popular with audiences that they decided to make it a permanent part of her character. Mila Kunis, who voices Meg, has said in interviews that she sometimes feels bad about all the abuse her character receives, but she understands that it's become essential to the show's dynamic. Let's dive into some voice acting trivia that's perfect for late-night pondering. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters on the show, but he almost didn't voice Stewie at all. The original plan was to have Stewie voiced by a child actor, but MacFarlane was worried about the controversial things Stewie would say and didn't want to put a real child in that position. So he developed Stewie's distinctive British accent as a way to make the character's adult thoughts coming from a baby's mouth even more surreal and funny. Chris Griffin's voice is another interesting story. Seth Green, who voices Chris, has to actively make his voice higher and more nasal to sound, like a teenage boy. As Green has gotten older, it's become more challenging for him to hit those high notes, so the sound engineers often have to digitally adjust his voice in post-production. This is why Chris's voice sometimes sounds slightly different between episodes, depending on how much digital manipulation was required. Here's a fact that connects to real-world events in a weird way. The episode where Peter starts his own political party called the Tea Party Patriots was written and animated before the actual Tea Party movement became prominent in American politics. When the episode aired, many viewers thought it was a commentary on current events, but it was actually just an incredible coincidence. The writers had to add a disclaimer explaining that any similarity to real political movements was purely accidental. Now for something completely different. The Pawtucket Brewery, where Peter works, is based on a real brewery in Rhode Island. Seth MacFarlane grew up in the area and used to drive past the brewery every day. He thought it would be funny to have his lazy cartoon character work at a place that produces something that would make him even lazier. The real brewery owners were initially concerned about being associated with the show, but eventually embraced it when they realized it was bringing them tourists. Let's talk about some of the show's more obscure running gags. You know how Conway Twitty always seems to appear at random moments? This started as an inside joke among the writers who were fans of old country music. They would play Conway Twitty songs during late-night writing sessions to keep themselves awake. Eventually, they decided to work him into the show as a bizarre non-sequitur that would confuse viewers and break up the pacing in unexpected ways. The Conway Twitty segments are actually some of the most expensive parts of the show to produce because they have to pay for the music rights. Here's something that'll make you look at Cleveland differently. When Cleveland got his own spin-off show, the original plan was for him to stay in Quahog, and the spin-off would focus on his adventures around town. But the writers realized that would be too limiting. So they created the elaborate storyline where his house gets destroyed and he moves to Virginia. The bathtub falling through multiple houses scene took months to animate and became one of the most memorable moments in the show's history, even though it was essentially just a setup for a spin-off that only lasted 4 seasons. Speaking of spin-offs, did you know that there was almost a Stewie and Brian road trip series? The popularity of their travel episodes convinced executives that the dynamic between the sophisticated baby and the intellectual dog could carry its own show. Scripts were written for 6 episodes before the project was scrapped due to budget concerns. Some of those unused scripts were later reworked into regular Family Guy episodes, which explains why some Stewie and Brian adventures feel more elaborate than usual. Let's get into some animation secrets that most viewers never notice. The way characters' eyes are drawn actually follows a complex mathematical formula to ensure they always look natural when the characters move their heads. This might sound boring, but it's actually fascinating when you realize that most animated shows just wing it and hope for the best. Family Guy's attention to eye movement is part of what makes the characters feel more alive and expressive than typical cartoon characters. Here's a weird fact about the show's merchandising history. The most popular Family Guy product ever sold wasn't a t-shirt or a toy. It was a cookbook called The Family Guy Cookbook that featured recipes supposedly created by each character. Peter's section was all comfort food and beer-based dishes. Lois had elegant dinner party recipes. Stewie contributed sophisticated international cuisine. And Brian's section was dinner for 15, entirely vegetarian. The cookbook actually received positive reviews from real food critics, which nobody expected. Now, for some trivia about the show's cancellation and revival that goes beyond what most people know. When Family Guy was first canceled, Seth MacFarlane was actually relieved. He was exhausted from working on the show and wanted to pursue other projects. But the DVD sales were so strong and the fan campaign so persistent that Fox offered him a deal he couldn't refuse, including complete creative control and a substantial budget increase. This is why the post-cancellation episodes often feel more ambitious and experimental than the early ones. The show's relationship with censors has always been complicated. But here's something most people don't realize. Family Guy actually has one of the most cooperative relationships with network censors of any adult animated show. Seth MacFarlane learned early on that if you give censors multiple options and let them feel like they're part of the creative process, they'll often let you get away with more controversial content. The writers deliberately write jokes they know will get cut, just so they can negotiate to keep the jokes they really want. Let's talk about some character backstories that were developed but never made it into episodes. Quagmire was originally supposed to have a twin brother who was everything he wasn't, completely respectful and monogamous. This character was going to be introduced as a way to explore Quagmire's personality through contrast, but the writers decided it would be funnier to keep him as an irredeemable character without any redemptive family members to soften his edges. Joe Swanson's backstory is much more detailed than what we see on screen. The writers created an entire timeline of his police career before his accident, including the names of his partners, his most famous cases, and even his police academy graduation rank. None of this has ever been mentioned in the show, but it helps the writers keep his character consistent and gives them material to draw from when they need Joe to demonstrate police knowledge or skills. Here's something about the show's music that might surprise you. Every musical number in Family Guy is performed live by the voice actors, even when their characters are supposed to be bad singers. Seth MacFarlane, who has released several jazz albums, insisted on this approach because he believes it makes the musical moments feel more authentic. This means that when Peter sings off-key, Seth MacFarlane is actually deliberately singing badly, which is apparently much harder than just singing well. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons goes deeper than their famous crossover episode. The two shows' writing staffs have been trading jokes and references for years in a friendly rivalry that most viewers never notice. If you watch carefully, you'll spot subtle Simpsons references in Family Guy episodes and vice versa. This tradition started when several Family Guy writers were hired away from The Simpsons, and they maintained friendships with their former colleagues. Now, here's a production fact that explains a lot about the show's pacing. Family Guy episodes are actually written to be about 30 minutes long, but they're edited down to fit the 22-minute television format. This means there are about 8 minutes of content cut from every episode. These deleted scenes aren't just throwaway jokes either. They often contain character development and plot details that would make the episodes feel more complete. Some of these deleted scenes have been released on DVD collections, and they often change how you interpret the episodes. The show's approach to celebrity guest stars is completely different from most animated comedies. Instead of having celebrities play themselves or obvious parodies of themselves, Family Guy often casts them as completely random characters. This creates a fun game for viewers who recognize the voices but can't immediately place where they know them from. Adam West playing the mayor was the template for this approach, and it's been incredibly successful at attracting high-profile guest stars who want to try something different. Let's explore some of the show's more philosophical elements that get overlooked because of all the random humor. The relationship between Stewie and Brian is actually a sophisticated exploration of the friendship between youth and experience. Stewie represents unlimited potential and ambition, while Brian represents the reality of compromise and disappointment that comes with age. Their adventures often end with both characters learning something, but in subtle ways that don't feel preachy or forced. The show's treatment of time travel and alternate realities follows surprisingly consistent rules. The writers created an internal logic system for how these sci-fi elements work in the Family Guy universe, even though they rarely explain it to viewers. This attention to detail is why the time travel episodes feel coherent instead of just random, and it allows them to create genuine consequences for the characters' actions across multiple episodes. Here's something about the animation process that most people never consider. Each episode of Family Guy requires approximately 15,000 individual drawings. The animators have developed shortcuts and techniques to make this process more efficient, but it still takes about 8 months from the initial script to the finished episode. This explains why the show sometimes references events that seem outdated by the time the episode airs. The references were current when the episode was being written and animated. The voice recording process is also more complex than most people realize. While some animated shows record all the voices separately, Family Guy often records the main cast together in the same room. This creates more natural-sounding conversations and allows the actors to play off each other's energy. Seth MacFarlane switches between his different character voices during these sessions, which the other actors say is both impressive and slightly disturbing to witness in person. Now for some trivia about the show's impact on popular culture that goes beyond the obvious memes and catchphrases. Family Guy has been credited with popularizing the rapid-fire pop culture reference style that's now common in comedy. Before Family Guy, most TV shows would make 1 or 2 cultural references per episode. Family Guy started making dozens of references per episode, training audiences to catch quick jokes and creating a more interactive viewing experience. The show's influence on internet culture is also significant. Family Guy was one of the first TV shows to embrace online fan communities and viral marketing. The creators regularly engage with fans on social media and have incorporated fan suggestions into actual episodes. This relationship between creators and fans has become the standard for modern entertainment. But Family Guy was pioneering this approach when most TV executives were still afraid of the internet. Finally, here's a fact that brings everything full circle. Despite all the random humor and bizarre storylines, Family Guy is actually one of the most carefully planned shows on television. Every season has an overarching theme that connects the episodes, even though these themes are subtle enough that most viewers don't consciously notice them. The writers map out character development arcs that span multiple seasons, ensuring that even the most outrageous episodes contribute to larger storytelling goals. As you drift off to sleep tonight, Remember that somewhere in the world, there are people whose full-time job is deciding exactly how long Peter Griffin's fights with a giant chicken should last. Sweet dreams, and may your nights be filled with fewer random cutaway gags than the average Family Guy episode. Have you ever wondered why Family Guy episodes feel like fever dreams that somehow make perfect sense at 3 in the morning? Tonight, we're diving into the most bizarre, unexpected, and downright weird facts about this animated chaos machine that's been keeping us entertained and slightly disturbed for over 2 decades. From secret celebrity cameos you never noticed to production secrets that will change how you watch every episode, these facts are perfect for those late-night rabbit holes when your brain needs something wonderfully random to chew on. Picture this. It's 1999, and a young Seth MacFarlane is sitting in a cramped animation studio, probably surviving on nothing but coffee and pure creative madness, sketching out what would become one of television's most unpredictable shows. But here's something that might surprise you. Family Guy was actually rejected by multiple networks before Fox finally took a chance on it. The original pilot was so different from what we know today that Peter Griffin didn't even have his signature chin dimple. That's right, the most recognizable feature of television's most chaotic dad was an afterthought added later in development. Speaking of Peter Griffin's design, here's a fact that will blow your mind every time you see him on screen. Seth MacFarlane has admitted that Peter's appearance was directly inspired by a security guard he encountered at his college. This unnamed hero of late-night campus safety became the visual foundation for a character who would go on to terrorize animated television for decades. Imagine being that security guard and randomly discovering years later that you're the face of one of America's most beloved cartoon disasters. But the real magic happens when you start digging into the voice acting secrets. Seth MacFarlane doesn't just voice the main characters, he performs Stewie, Brian, Peter, and several recurring characters, often having entire conversations with himself during recording sessions. The studio engineers have described these solo recording sessions as watching someone have the world's most entertaining mental breakdown. MacFarlane literally argues with himself, switches between character voices mid-sentence, and somehow maintains the distinct personality of each character flawlessly. Here's where things get really interesting from a production standpoint. The show's writers have a tradition called the random joke jar, where they collect the most absurd, context-free gags throughout the season. When they're stuck on an episode or need to fill time, they literally reach into this jar and randomly select bizarre scenarios to animate. This explains why you'll be watching a normal family dinner scene that suddenly cuts to a 3-minute sequence about a time-traveling sandwich. It's not lazy writing. It's intentionally chaotic creativity with a system behind the madness. The cutaway gags that make Family Guy so distinctive weren't originally planned to be such a huge part of the show. In early episodes, they used these random flashbacks sparingly. But when they noticed these moments got the biggest laughs and the most social media attention, they leaned into the format completely. Now, these seemingly random interruptions are carefully crafted to hit specific comedic beats and often take longer to animate than the main storyline of entire episodes. One of the most mind-bending facts involves the show's relationship with celebrity guest stars. Many A-list celebrities have appeared on Family Guy without most viewers ever realizing it because their characters are so obscure or brief. Drew Barrymore once voiced a background character who had exactly 3 words of dialogue spread across 2 episodes. The producers love casting major stars in tiny roles as inside jokes for the industry, creating this weird Hollywood treasure hunt for eagle-eyed fans. The character of Stewie Griffin underwent one of television's most subtle character evolutions. In early seasons, Stewie was genuinely intended to be an evil genius baby-plotting world domination. But as the show progressed, the writers began exploring his character's vulnerability and intelligence in different ways. The transition was so gradual that most viewers didn't consciously notice when Stewie evolved from potential supervillain to the show's emotional center and Brian's best friend. This character development happened organically through hundreds of small writing decisions across multiple seasons. Here's something that will change how you watch every Brian and Stewie episode. Their relationship was originally supposed to remain antagonistic throughout the series. The writers planned for Brian to be constantly annoyed by Stewie's schemes and intellectual pretensions. However, the voice acting chemistry between Seth MacFarlane's 2 characters was so natural and compelling that the writers began crafting episodes specifically around their friendship. Some of the show's most acclaimed episodes including the time travel and multiverse adventures, exist purely because the Brian-Stewie dynamic became too interesting to ignore. The animation process for Family Guy involves secrets that most fans never consider. Each episode requires approximately 4 months from initial script to final animation, but here's the weird part. They often animate scenes completely out of order, based on character availability and studio scheduling. This means the emotional arc of an episode might be animated backwards, with the climactic scenes completed weeks before the setup scenes. The animators have to maintain character continuity and emotional consistency without seeing the full episode in sequence until the very end of production. Musical numbers in Family Guy aren't just random comedic choices. They serve a specific psychological function in the show's pacing. The writers discovered that musical sequences reset viewer attention spans and create natural breaks in the chaotic energy that defines most episodes. When you feel overwhelmed by rapid-fire jokes and cutaway gags, a musical number gives your brain permission to reset and re-engage with the storyline. It's basically psychological manipulation disguised as entertainment, and it works perfectly. The show's relationship with censorship creates some of the most interesting behind-the-scenes stories. Family Guy pushes boundaries so consistently that the network has entire meetings dedicated to determining what crosses the line versus what's cleverly subversive. The writers have become experts at crafting jokes that technically comply with broadcast standards while still managing to be completely inappropriate. They've turned censorship navigation into its own art form, often making the censored versions of jokes funnier than the original uncensored concepts. Here's a fact that demonstrates the show's cultural impact in ways you might not expect. Family Guy references have been spotted in congressional hearings, Supreme Court footnotes, and international diplomatic communications. Politicians and legal scholars apparently watch the show and unconsciously incorporate its humor patterns into serious discourse. There's something simultaneously hilarious and terrifying about the idea that Stewie Griffin's speech patterns are influencing actual government policy discussions. The economics behind Family Guy reveal fascinating insights into modern television production. Each episode costs significantly more to produce than most people realize because of the sheer amount of custom animation required for cutaway gags. A single random flashback sequence might require creating entirely new character designs, backgrounds, and animation styles that will never be used again. The show essentially produces mini-movies within every episode, making it one of the most expensive animated series on television, despite its seemingly simple art style. Voice recording sessions for Family Guy episodes are legendary among industry professionals for their complete unpredictability. Seth MacFarlane often improvises entire scenes in character, creating alternate versions of jokes that the writers never conceived. Sometimes these improvised moments are so funny that entire episode plots get rewritten around a single spontaneous line delivery. The recording booth becomes this weird laboratory where cartoon characters take on lives of their own and influence their own storylines. The show's treatment of controversial topics follows a specific comedy philosophy that Seth MacFarlane has described as equal opportunity offense. The writing team maintains detailed charts tracking which groups, topics, and themes they've targeted to ensure their irreverence remains balanced across the political and social spectrum. This systematic approach to controversy means every offensive joke is part of a larger pattern designed to prevent the show from developing any consistent political agenda beyond general chaos. Cleveland's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, was actually conceived as a way to explore Family Guy's universe from a completely different perspective while maintaining the same comedic DNA. The failed experiment taught the creators valuable lessons about what makes Family Guy specifically work versus what elements translate to other formats. Cleveland's return to Family Guy brought with him subtle character changes informed by his solo series experience, creating this weird continuity where a character evolved through his own failed show. The internet age has transformed how Family Guy episodes are created and consumed. The writers now monitor social media reactions to episodes in real time and adjust future storylines based on which jokes generate the most memes and viral moments. This feedback loop means the show is constantly evolving to match internet culture while simultaneously influencing internet culture. It's become this weird, symbiotic relationship where the show and its online fan base co-create content together. Animation errors in Family Guy often become intentional running gags when fans notice and celebrate them online. The production team has learned to embrace happy accidents, sometimes deliberately recreating animation mistakes in future episodes as callbacks to their own imperfections. This self-aware approach to production errors creates additional layers of humor for dedicated fans while maintaining accessibility for casual viewers. The show's influence on other animated series is more extensive than most people realize. Writing techniques, character development approaches, and comedic timing patterns pioneered by Family Guy appear throughout modern animated television. Shows that seem completely different often use Family Guy's structural innovations adapted to their own specific styles and audiences. It's become the secret template for contemporary animated comedy without most viewers consciously recognizing the influence. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that somewhere in the world, animators are probably working on next season's episodes, crafting new combinations of chaos and creativity that will eventually become someone else's late-night viewing experience. Family Guy continues to exist in this weird space between sophisticated entertainment and absolute nonsense, providing the perfect mental soundtrack for those moments when your brain needs something familiar yet unpredictable to focus on while the rest of the world sleeps. The show's legacy isn't just about the jokes or the characters. It's about proving that television audiences are capable of appreciating complexity disguised as simplicity, intelligence hidden within apparent randomness, and genuine emotional moments embedded in absolute chaos. Sweet dreams, and may your unconscious mind sort through all this delightful weirdness while you rest. Have you ever wondered why Peter Griffin's laugh is so weirdly infectious, or how Family Guy predicted some of the most bizarre real-world events years before they happened? Tonight, we're diving deep into the most mind-bending facts about Family Guy that will either put you to sleep or keep you awake thinking about how insane this show really is. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through streaming services, and you land on Family Guy. Maybe you've seen every episode a dozen times, or maybe you're just discovering the chaos that is the Griffin family. Either way, there are secrets hidden in plain sight that even the most dedicated fans miss. From voice acting mysteries that will blow your mind to cultural references so obscure they require a PhD to understand, Family Guy is way more complex than anyone gives it credit for. Let's start with something that sounds completely made up but is absolutely true. Seth MacFarlane, the creator of Family Guy, was supposed to be on one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center on September 11th. He had a ticket for American Airlines Flight 11, but missed it because he was hungover and his travel agent gave him the wrong departure time. That single hangover and scheduling mix-up literally changed television history. Without that random twist of fate, we never would have gotten the Griffin family or any of Seth's other animated shows. But here's where it gets even weirder. Family Guy has this uncanny ability to predict future events that borders on supernatural. Remember the episode where Peter hurts his knee and makes that hissing sound while sucking air through his teeth? That became one of the most recognizable memes on the internet, years before memes were even called memes. The show was creating viral content before viral content existed. Speaking of predictions, Family Guy called out Kevin Spacey's behavior in a 2005 episode where Stewie runs naked through a shopping mall and someone says, "Somebody call the police." And another character responds, "I think Kevin Spacey already did. This was more than a decade before the Kevin Spacey scandal broke. How do the writers keep nailing these things?" It's like they have a crystal ball hidden in their writing room. The voice acting situation is absolutely bonkers when you really think about it. Seth MacFarlane voices Peter Griffin, Brian Griffin, Stewie Griffin, Glenn Quagmire, Tom Tucker, and Carter Pewterschmidt, among others. That means he's literally having conversations with himself for huge chunks of every episode. Imagine being in the recording booth talking to yourself as different characters for hours on end. It's like method acting taken to an extreme level. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois Griffin, also voices Trisha Takanawa and several other female characters. During the early seasons, she was actually a writer on Mad TV, which explains why some of the humor has that sketch comedy feel. The woman can switch between Lois's nasally Long Island accent and Trisha's professional news anchor voice seamlessly. Voice actors don't get nearly enough credit for their range. Here's a fact that will mess with your head. The show was actually canceled twice by Fox. The first cancellation happened in 2002 after just 3 seasons. But then something magical happened. Adult Swim started showing reruns, and DVD sales went through the roof. Fox realized they had made a massive mistake and brought the show back in 2005. Then they canceled it again in 2009, but fan outcry was so intense they reversed the decision within weeks. Family Guy is like a cockroach in the best possible way. It just refuses to die. The animation process is way more complicated than you might think. Each episode takes about 10 months to complete, from initial script to final animation. The overseas animation studios in South Korea handle most of the actual drawing, while the American team focuses on storyboarding and voice work. It's a global operation just to make Peter fall down the stairs in a funny way. Brian Griffin's character is loosely based on a real dog that Seth MacFarlane's family had when he was growing up. The real Brian was apparently much better behaved than his cartoon counterpart, though. He didn't drink martinis or write terrible novels or have existential crises about being a dog. The fictional Brian's pretentious intellectual personality came from Seth's observations of people he knew in college who took themselves way too seriously. The Conway Twitty cutaway gags started as an inside joke among the writers, but became this legendary running bit that fans either love or hate with no middle ground. These segments where the show just cuts to Conway Twitty performing a complete song were meant to be the most random non sequiturs possible. The fact that they kept doing it even when fans complained just made it funnier to the writers. It's comedy through pure stubbornness. Stewie Griffin's sexuality has been a topic of debate for years. Seth MacFarlane has given different answers in interviews ranging from Stewie being gay to being sexually fluid to being too young for any of it to matter. The ambiguity seems intentional. Stewie exists in this weird space where he's simultaneously a baby and this sophisticated character with adult concerns. It's like the writers are deliberately keeping us guessing. The show's relationship with censorship is fascinating. Standards and practices at Fox let certain things slide while being strict about others in ways that seem completely arbitrary. Characters can be violently injured in cartoonish ways, but heaven forbid someone says a particular word or shows too much animated skin. The writers have turned working around censorship into an art form. Cleveland's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, ran for 4 seasons and was actually pretty decent, but never found the same audience as Family Guy. When Cleveland moved back to Quahog, it felt like a homecoming. Mike Henry, who voiced Cleveland, stepped down from the role in 2020, citing the need for black actors to voice black characters. The recasting brought Arif Zahir into the role, and honestly, the transition was seamless. The show's pop culture references are so dense you could teach entire courses on them. From obscure 1,980 seconds commercials to deep cuts from classic Hollywood movies, the writers assume their audience has an encyclopedic knowledge of American media history. Some references are so specific that you need to be a certain age and from a particular region to get them. It's like they're rewarding viewers for paying attention to decades of television and movies. Peter Griffin's job at the brewery is based on real brewery operations that Seth MacFarlane researched. The Pawtucket Patriot beer is obviously a parody of Samuel Adams, but the actual brewery dynamics and workplace situations are surprisingly accurate. Peter's incompetence is exaggerated for comedy, but apparently real brewery workers have told the writers that some of their workplace storylines hit uncomfortably close to home. The show's theme song is performed by Walter Murphy, who also composed music for Saturday Night Fever. Having a disco legend write your cartoon theme song is the kind of random collaboration that only happens in Hollywood. The orchestral arrangement gives the show this grand, cinematic feel that contrasts perfectly with the chaotic family dynamics. Meg Griffin is voiced by Mila Kunis, who was just 15 years old when she started the role. She's grown up with the character in a way that's pretty unique for voice acting. Lacey Chabert voiced Meg in the first season before scheduling conflicts forced her to step down. The transition happened so smoothly that most viewers didn't even notice the change. The show's animation style has evolved significantly over 20-plus seasons. Early episodes had this rougher hand-drawn quality, while newer episodes are much more polished and computer-assisted. You can literally watch the technology advance by comparing episodes from different eras. The character designs have become more standardized, but somehow less distinctive. Family Guy's influence on internet culture is immeasurable. Before YouTube compilation videos existed, fans were trading Family Guy clips on early file-sharing networks. The show basically invented the concept of animated content going viral. Cutaway gags are perfect for social media because they're self-contained comedy bits that work without context. The writer's room must be absolute chaos. How do you pitch ideas for a show where literally anything can happen? The creative process seems to involve taking normal family situations and pushing them to the most extreme possible conclusions. It's like improv comedy, but with months of animation work required to execute each joke. Seth MacFarlane's other projects, like The Orville and his music albums, show his range beyond comedy, but Family Guy remains his most recognizable creation. The show has become this cultural touchstone that defines a particular era of animated television. Love it or hate it, you can't ignore its impact. The merchandising empire around Family Guy is surprisingly extensive. From t-shirts featuring Stewie's quotes to Peter Griffin action figures, the show has spawned countless products. The fact that people want to wear clothing featuring cartoon characters making inappropriate jokes says something profound about modern comedy consumption. Here's something that will keep you thinking as you drift off to sleep. Family Guy exists in this weird space between family sitcom and surreal comedy experiment. It's simultaneously the most normal and most bizarre show on television. The Griffin family deals with everyday problems, like paying bills and getting along with neighbors. But they also travel through time, fight giant chickens, and have musical numbers about random topics. The show's longevity is a testament to something deeper than just comedy. It's comfort food for your brain. Even when the jokes don't land, there's something familiar and reassuring about Peter's voice or Stewie's elaborate schemes. It's like spending time with dysfunctional friends who make you feel better about your own problems. As you close your eyes tonight, maybe you'll dream about cutaway gags from your own life, or imagine what it would be like to have conversations with your pet, like Brian and the Griffin family. Or maybe you'll just sleep soundly, knowing that somewhere in the world, animators are working on the next episode where Peter does something incredibly stupid and somehow everything works out fine. Sweet dreams, and remember, we all have a little bit of Griffin family chaos in our lives. The difference is, their chaos gets turned into comedy gold, while ours just makes us tired. At least now you know some random Family Guy facts that are just weird enough to either bore you to sleep or keep you awake. Wondering what other secrets are hidden in your favorite animated shows?
Have you ever wondered what happens when celebrities get roasted so hard by Family Guy that they actually fight back? Tonight, we're diving into the wild world of bruised egos, angry tweets, and even courtroom drama. Some of these reactions will shock you, others might make you laugh, but all of them prove that not everyone can take a joke when Seth MacFarlane comes calling. Picture this. You're an Oscar-winning actor at the top of your game, and suddenly millions of people are watching an animated dog make fun of your nose. That's exactly what happened to Adrien Brody. And let me tell you, he did not find it amusing. During a murder mystery episode where characters are getting picked off one by one, Tom Tucker gets cornered by the other guests who think he's the killer. When they finally take him down, someone delivers this brutal line about casting Brody in a movie adaptation, basically saying nobody would want to watch it. But Family Guy wasn't finished with poor Adrien yet. They doubled down with another scene featuring Meg on a date watching a 3D movie. What's playing on screen? Adrien Brody doing shirtless sit-ups, and his famously prominent nose literally pokes out of the screen in full three-dimensional glory. It's the kind of visual gag that makes you cringe and laugh at the same time. So, how did the Academy Award winner handle being the butt of these jokes? Not gracefully. According to Seth MacFarlane himself, in interviews, Seth revealed that when he approached Brody at a Hollywood party to smooth things over, mentioning how much he enjoyed one of Brody's films, the actor made it crystal clear that there were definitely hard feelings. No amount of compliments about his work could undo the sting of those animated jabs. This brings us to our next celebrity casualty, and this one gets really messy because it involves politics and personal family matters. Sarah Palin found herself in Family Guy's crosshairs during an episode where Chris goes on a date with a girl who has Down syndrome. During their dinner conversation, the girl casually mentions her family background, specifically that her mother used to be the governor of Alaska. Now, unless there's another former Alaskan governor out there with a child named Ellen, this was clearly aimed at Sarah Palin and her family situation. The timing made this particularly sensitive because Palin's son, who has Down syndrome, was only 2 years old at the time. The Palin family's reaction was swift and fierce. Sarah took to social media calling Family Guy a pathetic cartoon and labeling the creators heartless jerks. But she didn't stop there. She appeared on television talk shows, describing the writers as cruel and cold-hearted people who had crossed a line by making jokes about the disabled community. Family Guy fired back through Seth MacFarlane, who pointed out something interesting during his own television appearance. The character making those comments was actually voiced by Andrea Friedman, an actress who herself has Down syndrome. This actress later clarified that she felt the joke was directed at Sarah Palin personally, not at people with disabilities, and she even suggested that Palin simply didn't have a sense of humor about the situation. But sometimes Family Guy doesn't even need to directly target someone to cause controversy. Chloe Grace Moretz learned this the hard way when she became collateral damage in an internet phenomenon. During an episode where Peter decides to lose weight so he can ride a roller coaster, he sets his sights on looking as good as a character called Legs Go All the Way Up Griffin. This character was basically a visual gag. All legs with no torso. The joke itself had nothing to do with Moretz, but someone online photoshopped her picture to match this character design, and the image went viral across social media platforms. While the internet found it hilarious, Moretz definitely didn't. She publicly stated that this manipulated image seriously affected her body image and self-confidence, causing her to retreat from public appearances for a while. The cruel irony is that Family Guy never even mentioned her name, but she still got caught in the crossfire of internet culture. Speaking of crossing lines, Family Guy once ventured into territory so sensitive that it sparked outrage from disability advocates, religious groups, and grieving family members alike. They decided to create a school play episode featuring Terry Schiavo, the woman who became the center of one of America's most heartbreaking right-to-die legal battles. In typical Family Guy fashion, they turned this tragic real-life situation into a musical number performed by preschoolers. The kids sang cheerful songs with lyrics comparing Schiavo to an expensive plant that should just be unplugged. Even within the show, Brian questioned whether it was too soon for such material. But that didn't stop the episode from airing. The backlash was immediate and intense. Terry's own brother, Bobby Schindler Jr., was so furious about what he saw as insensitive treatment of his family's tragedy that he actually called for Fox to cancel Family Guy entirely. Religious groups and disability advocates joined the chorus of criticism, arguing that some subjects should be off-limits, even for satirical comedy. Now, getting roasted by Family Guy hits different when you're a comedian yourself. Rachel Bloom, creator and star of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, discovered this firsthand during an episode where Brian impulsively marries a woman with cancer. The storyline gets complicated when the woman's cancer goes into remission, leaving Brian stuck in a marriage he never really wanted. To make matters worse for Brian, his new wife gains weight, develops some unpleasant habits, and constantly gushes about her favorite television show. That's where Family Guy took their shot at Bloom's creation, having the character describe Crazy Ex-Girlfriend in dismissive terms, focusing on a musical number about menstruation, and suggesting that watching such shows makes someone unattractive and unlikable. Bloom's reaction was more nuanced than outright fury, but she definitely wasn't laughing. She pointed out that the scene reeked of male condescension, essentially equating appreciation for her show with being an undesirable woman. While she didn't launch a full-scale public campaign against Family Guy, her response made it clear that she felt the jab was rooted in sexist assumptions about female-created content. Sometimes, though, celebrities handle Family Guy roasts with unexpected maturity. Dax Shepard found himself on the receiving end of a quick but cutting intelligence joke during an episode where Brian discovers he has a brain tumor. When the family learns the tumor is benign and debates whether Brian should have surgery, someone quips about whether Dax Shepard turned out all right, clearly questioning his intelligence. Rather than ranting on social media or giving angry interviews, Shepard took a different approach. He brought up the joke directly with Seth MacFarlane during an appearance on his own podcast. He acknowledged that he understood the writers weren't trying to be malicious and recognized the nuanced nature of comedy, but he was honest about the fact that it still stung a little. This mature, direct conversation probably earned him more respect than any angry response could have. One of the most interesting cases involves James Woods, who went from being Family Guy's most willing participant to eventually walking away from the show entirely. For years, Woods not only tolerated being parodied but actively participated, voicing an exaggerated version of himself in multiple episodes. He played up his persona as a chaotic, scheming character who would steal identities, fake his own death, and constantly torment the Griffin family. Woods initially embraced the self-parody, even refusing payment because he genuinely enjoyed making fun of himself. This collaboration worked brilliantly for both parties, giving Family Guy a celebrity who was game for anything while allowing Woods to show his sense of humor. But by 2018, something changed. Woods became more politically vocal on social media, and when Family Guy offered him another episode, he turned it down. He tweeted that he felt the new material was too politically biased, and worse than being offensive, it simply wasn't funny anymore. He accused the show of becoming mean-spirited rather than genuinely comedic. After that public criticism, Woods disappeared from Family Guy entirely, marking the end of one of their most successful celebrity partnerships. The most extreme legal response came from Carol Burnett, who decided that if Family Guy was going to use her intellectual property, she was going to make them pay for it literally. The controversy stemmed from a brief scene where Quagmire visits an adult bookstore, and viewers catch a glimpse of Burnett's iconic charwoman character from her classic sketch show working as a janitor. The appearance lasted maybe 2 seconds and seemed relatively harmless by Family Guy standards, but Burnett saw it as a serious violation of her rights. She filed a lawsuit against Fox, claiming copyright infringement and misuse of her character without permission. She wasn't seeking a small settlement either. Reports indicated she wanted somewhere between $2 and $6 million in damages. The legal system didn't side with Burnett, however. Judge Dean Pregerson dismissed the case, ruling that Family Guy was protected under First Amendment parody provisions. Interestingly, though, the judge did note that while the show was legally protected, he found the scene distasteful and offensive to Burnett personally. So while she didn't win any money, she did get judicial acknowledgement that her feelings were valid. These reactions reveal something fascinating about celebrity culture and comedy boundaries. Some stars, like Dax Shepard and initially James Woods, showed they could laugh at themselves and engage constructively with satirical content. Others, like Adrian Brody and Sarah Palin, felt genuinely hurt and responded with public criticism. Still, others like Carol Burnett saw legal violations that needed addressing through the court system. What makes Family Guy's celebrity controversies particularly interesting is how they reflect broader conversations about comedy, free speech, and personal dignity in the digital age. When a show has millions of viewers and endless social media amplification, even a brief joke can follow someone around for years. The internet's ability to turn a 2-second gag into a viral meme, as happened with Chloe Grace Moretz, demonstrates how modern comedy can have unintended consequences. The show's approach to sensitive topics like disability, terminal illness, and personal tragedy also raises questions about whether any subject should be off-limits for satirical treatment. The Terry Schiavo episode particularly highlighted this tension, with critics arguing that some real-life situations are too painful and recent for comedic treatment, while others defend the right to satirize any public figure or event. From a psychological perspective, these celebrity reactions also reveal how public figures cope with being reduced to punchlines. Adrian Brody's continued resentment suggests that some people never fully recover from being mocked on such a large scale, especially when the jokes focus on physical characteristics they cannot change. Sarah Palin's fierce defense of her family shows how comedy can become deeply personal when it touches on sensitive family matters. The gender dynamics in some of these controversies are also worth examining. Rachel Bloom's observation about male condescension in comedy writing reflects broader conversations about how female creators and their work get treated in predominantly male-dominated comedy spaces. Her measured but critical response showed how women in entertainment often have to balance standing up for themselves while avoiding being labeled as humorless or overly sensitive. James Woods' evolution from enthusiastic participant to critic illustrates how political polarization can affect entertainment relationships. His willingness to mock himself disappeared when he felt the show's political perspective diverged too far from his own beliefs, suggesting that even self-deprecating humor has limits when it conflicts with personal values. The legal aspects, particularly Carol Burnett's lawsuit, highlight the complex intersection between parody rights and intellectual property protection. While courts generally protect satirical content under free speech provisions, celebrities still have legitimate concerns about how their likenesses and creations get used without permission, especially in commercial contexts. These stories also demonstrate the power dynamics between individual celebrities and large entertainment corporations. When Family Guy makes a joke, it has the backing of major networks and widespread distribution, while individual celebrities often have limited recourse beyond public statements or legal action. This imbalance can make satirical attacks feel particularly unfair to those being targeted. The Internet's role in amplifying these controversies cannot be overlooked. Social media platforms allow both celebrities to respond directly to perceived slights and fans to create additional content that extends the original jokes in unexpected directions. Chloe Grace Moretz's experience shows how online communities can take a television gag and transform it into something more personally damaging than the original creators intended. Looking at the long-term impact of these controversies, it's clear that some celebrities never fully recover their relationship with Family Guy or its fan base. Adrian Brody's continued resentment years later suggests that animated mockery can create lasting professional and personal damage. Other celebrities like Dax Shepard seem to have moved on more successfully by addressing the situation directly and maturely. The varying reactions also reflect different approaches to celebrity image management in the digital age. Some stars try to ignore satirical attacks, hoping they'll fade away naturally. Others engage directly, either through humor or criticism. Still others pursue legal remedies when they feel their rights have been violated. None of these approaches seems universally successful, suggesting that there's no perfect way to handle being satirized by popular media. These celebrity feuds with Family Guy ultimately reveal the complex relationship between comedy, fame, and personal dignity in contemporary entertainment. While satirical shows claim the right to mock public figures, those figures retain the right to respond, criticize, and seek legal remedies when they feel boundaries have been crossed. The ongoing debates about these controversies suggest that society is still figuring out the appropriate balance between comedic freedom and personal respect. As entertainment becomes more personalized and social media makes everyone more accessible, these questions will likely become even more complicated. Whether you think these celebrities were justified in their reactions or believe they should have just laughed it off, one thing is clear. Family Guy's willingness to target anyone and everyone has created a fascinating collection of bruised egos and public feuds that continues to spark conversation about the limits and responsibilities of satirical comedy. Want to dive deeper into Family Guy controversies and see why so many people are calling for the show to be canceled entirely? Check out our next video exploring the growing backlash against the series and whether all this controversy is finally catching up with Seth MacFarlane's creation. Think you know everything about your favorite fictional families? Tonight, I'm about to shatter everything you thought you knew about the characters we grew up watching. What if I told you that beneath the laughs and heartwarming moments, these beloved family shows have been hiding some seriously dark psychological truths? Get ready, because we're diving deep into the twisted minds of television's most iconic families, and trust me, you'll never look at them the same way again. Welcome back to another mind-bending exploration, where we peel back the layers of pop culture to reveal the uncomfortable realities lurking beneath the surface. I'm your host, and today we're embarking on a journey that will fundamentally change how you view family dynamics on screen. We're not just talking about quirky character traits or funny running gags here. We're exposing genuine psychological disorders, toxic behaviors, and dysfunctional patterns that would make any therapist's notebook overflow with red flags. Have you ever wondered why certain family sitcoms feel so uncomfortably familiar? Why we laugh at situations that, in real life, would have us calling social services? That's because these shows, intentionally or not, mirror the darkest aspects of human psychology wrapped in a comedic package. Tonight, we are unwrapping that package and examining what's really inside. Let's start with something that might shock you about animated families. You know those characters we quote daily and consider harmless entertainment? Well, they're actually perfect case studies for some of the most destructive personality traits known to psychology. Take the concept of narcissistic behavior patterns, for instance. We see characters who consistently put their own desires above family welfare, manipulate situations to benefit themselves, and show zero empathy for others' suffering. Consider how often we witness parents in these shows making decisions that directly harm their children's emotional development. They dismiss their kids' feelings, mock their aspirations, and create environments where psychological safety doesn't exist. Yet we laugh because it's presented as comedy. The truth is, if these behaviors occurred in real families, we'd recognize them as forms of emotional abuse. But the darkness goes deeper than individual character flaws. These shows often normalize dysfunction by presenting it as typical family life. Children viewers internalize these relationship patterns as normal, potentially carrying these toxic blueprints into their own future families. It's a cycle that perpetuates unhealthy dynamics across generations, all disguised as entertainment. Let's examine the phenomenon of scapegoating within fictional families. There's almost always that one family member who bears the brunt of everyone else's dysfunction. They become the emotional dumping ground, the target of ridicule, and the convenient explanation for all family problems. This character serves as the family's pressure valve, allowing other members to avoid confronting their own issues by projecting everything onto this unfortunate soul. What's particularly disturbing is how these scapegoated characters are often portrayed as deserving their treatment. The show's narrative subtly suggests that their suffering is justified, teaching audiences that certain people are acceptable targets for cruelty. This psychological manipulation is incredibly sophisticated and deeply harmful, especially when absorbed by impressionable viewers. Moving on to another dark pattern, we see frequent examples of emotional manipulation disguised as parental love. Characters use guilt, shame, and conditional affection to control family members' behavior. They withdraw love as punishment and offer it as reward, creating anxious attachment patterns that would haunt real children for life. The scary part is how these manipulation tactics are often presented as caring parental behavior. Financial dynamics in these fictional families also reveal disturbing truths about power and control. Money becomes a weapon used to maintain dominance hierarchies within the family unit. Characters leverage financial dependency to strip away others' autonomy, creating situations where family members must choose between self-respect and survival. This economic abuse rarely gets labeled as such within the show's context, but it's a form of domestic violence nonetheless. Then there's the normalization of substance abuse as a coping mechanism for family stress. Characters regularly turn to alcohol or other substances to deal with their dysfunctional relationships, and this behavior is consistently portrayed as acceptable or even admirable. The message sent is that chemical numbing is preferable to addressing underlying problems, a philosophy that has destroyed countless real families. The violence, both physical and emotional, that permeates these shows is staggering when you really analyze it. Characters assault each other, destroy property in fits of rage, and engage in psychological warfare that would traumatize actual family members. Yet because it's animated or comedic, we're conditioned to view this violence as harmless fun rather than recognizing it as abusive behavior that mirrors real-world domestic violence patterns. What about the complete absence of healthy conflict resolution in these families? Disagreements escalate to explosive confrontations, problems get swept under the rug rather than addressed, and family members hold grudges that span entire seasons. There's never any genuine communication, compromise, or emotional growth. Instead, conflicts either explode into chaos or get ignored until they fester into something worse. The gender dynamics in these shows often perpetuate harmful stereotypes that reinforce toxic relationship patterns. Male characters are frequently portrayed as bumbling, emotionally unavailable, and incapable of basic actions. Adulting skills. Female characters often become long-suffering martyrs who enable bad behavior while sacrificing their own needs. These portrayals normalize codependency and emotional labor imbalances that plague real relationships. Let's talk about the children in these fictional families, because their treatment is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all. They're often parentified, forced to take on adult responsibilities while their actual parents remain childlike. They become emotional caretakers for dysfunctional adults, a role reversal that stunts their development and robs them of childhood innocence. The shows present this as maturity or responsibility, but it's actually a form of childhood emotional abuse. The sibling dynamics portrayed are equally problematic, characterized by intense competition, jealousy, and cruelty. Siblings are pitted against each other for parental attention and approval, creating lifelong rivalries rather than supportive bonds. The message conveyed is that family members are competitors rather than allies, fostering an environment where trust and cooperation become impossible. Privacy and personal boundaries are consistently violated in these fictional families. Characters rifle through each other's belongings, eavesdrop on private conversations, and invade personal space without consequence. This normalized boundary violation teaches viewers that family members don't deserve privacy or respect, setting up expectations that healthy relationships cannot meet. The way mental health issues are handled in these shows is particularly troubling. Characters displaying clear signs of depression, anxiety, or other psychological conditions are mocked rather than supported. Their struggles become punchlines rather than opportunities for compassion and understanding. This portrayal stigmatizes mental health challenges and discourages seeking help. Perhaps most disturbing is how these shows handle consequences for toxic behavior. Characters rarely face meaningful repercussions for their harmful actions. They might receive temporary comeuppance, but by the next episode, they're back to their destructive patterns without any real change or growth. This lack of consequences suggests that toxic behavior is acceptable as long as you're family. The enablement that occurs within these family systems is staggering. Instead of holding destructive family members accountable, other characters make excuses, cover up problems, and adapt their own behavior to accommodate dysfunction. This teaches viewers that enabling is loving, and that challenging toxic behavior is disloyal, perspectives that trap people in abusive relationships. Financial irresponsibility is often glorified in these shows, with characters making impulsive decisions that endanger their family's security. Yet there are rarely long-term consequences for these choices, sending the message that financial stability is unimportant and that someone else will always clean up the mess. This attitude contributes to cycles of poverty and instability in real families. The constant chaos and unpredictability in these fictional homes would be traumatic for real children. There's no stability, security, or peace. Instead, children live in environments where they never know what crisis will erupt next, what mood their parents will be in, or whether their basic needs will be met. This chronic stress would cause lasting developmental damage in reality. What's particularly insidious is how these shows use humor to make abuse palatable. When terrible behavior is packaged as comedy, our psychological defenses are lowered. We laugh at situations that should horrify us, gradually becoming desensitized to toxicity. This comedic reframing is a powerful tool that makes dysfunction seem normal and acceptable. The isolation these fictional families experience from healthy outside relationships is another red flag. They rarely maintain friendships or connections with functional people who might challenge their toxic patterns. This isolation prevents reality testing and allows dysfunction to flourish unchecked, much like how abusive relationships cut victims off from support systems. The power dynamics within these families are often rigidly hierarchical and authoritarian rather than collaborative and democratic. Decisions are made by whoever has the most power, regardless of how those decisions affect other family members. This teaches children that relationships are about dominance and submission, rather than mutual respect and partnership. Educational neglect is rampant in these fictional families, with parents showing little interest in their children's learning or development. Academic achievement is either ignored or mocked. Extracurricular activities are dismissed as unimportant, and intellectual curiosity is discouraged. This attitude toward education perpetuates cycles of underachievement and limits children's future opportunities. The way these shows handle emotions is deeply problematic. Genuine feelings are ridiculed, emotional expression is punished, and vulnerability is treated as weakness. Family members learn to suppress their authentic selves to survive, creating fake personas while their true needs go unmet. This emotional suppression leads to profound psychological damage over time. Perhaps most tragically, these fictional families never model what healthy relationships actually look like. Viewers, especially children, don't see examples of mutual respect, effective communication, genuine affection, or supportive problem-solving. Without these positive models, they lack blueprints for creating healthier relationships in their own lives. The normalization of chaos as family life is perhaps the most damaging message these shows convey. They suggest that dysfunction is inevitable, that all families are messed up, and that toxic behavior is just part of human nature. This fatalistic view prevents people from recognizing that healthy families do exist and that change is possible with effort and commitment. As we wrap up this disturbing journey through the psychology of fictional families, I want you to consider how these portrayals might have influenced your own expectations about family life. Have you normalized behaviors in your own relationships that you wouldn't accept from strangers? Have you laughed off red flags that deserved serious attention? Have you repeated patterns you learned from these shows without questioning their healthiness? The power of media to shape our understanding of normal is immense, and these family shows wield that power irresponsibly. They present dysfunction as entertainment while failing to acknowledge the real pain such behaviors cause in actual families. By recognizing these patterns, we can begin to break free from toxic blueprints and create healthier relationships. Remember, just because something is common doesn't make it healthy. And just because something makes us laugh doesn't mean it's harmless. Real families deserve better than the chaos and cruelty we've been taught to accept as normal. You deserve better. Your future family deserves better. If this analysis has opened your eyes to patterns in your own life, consider seeking support from mental health professionals who can help you develop healthier relationship skills. Remember that recognizing dysfunction is the first step toward healing, and that breaking cycles of toxicity is one of the most loving things you can do for yourself and future generations. What did you think of this deep dive into the dark psychology of fictional families? Did any of these patterns surprise you? Or did they confirm suspicions you already had? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more content that challenges the narratives we've been fed. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and most importantly, stay committed to creating healthier relationships than the ones we see on screen.
Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice, and somehow clawed its way back from television death each time? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre world behind one of the most controversial animated shows ever created. And trust me, the stories I'm about to share will blow your mind. From secret celebrity cameos that never made it to air, to the shocking real-life inspiration behind Stewie's character, we're uncovering Family Guy secrets that even die-hard fans have never heard before. But first, let me paint you a picture of just how close we came to never having Family Guy at all. Back in 1999, when Seth MacFarlane pitched his idea to Fox executives, he was so broke he was literally sleeping on a friend's couch in Los Angeles. The pilot episode cost over $2 million to produce, making it one of the most expensive animated pilots in television history at that time. And here's the kicker. Fox almost passed on it completely because they thought it was too similar to The Simpsons. The show's creator, Seth MacFarlane, has a background that's absolutely fascinating and explains so much about the show's unique humor. He actually started working in animation when he was just 18 years old, creating a thesis film at the Rhode Island School of Design that would later become the blueprint for Family Guy. That student film, which you can still find online today, featured early versions of Peter, Lois, and their dog Brian, though they looked quite different from what we know now. What most people don't realize is that MacFarlane does the voices for 4 main characters on the show. He's not just Peter Griffin, but also Brian the dog, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. The interesting part is how he developed each voice. Peter's voice was inspired by a security guard MacFarlane knew who had a thick Rhode Island accent. Brian's voice is essentially MacFarlane's natural speaking voice, while Stewie was originally supposed to sound like Rex, Harrison from My Fair Lady, though it evolved into something completely different over time. Speaking of Stewie, here's something that might surprise you. The character was initially written as a one-dimensional villain baby who wanted to kill his mother and take over the world. MacFarlane has admitted in interviews that Stewie's sexuality was deliberately kept ambiguous for years, and the writers would often joke about it in the writer's room. The character's development into a more complex, often effeminate, genius baby happened gradually over several seasons, and it wasn't planned from the beginning. The show's relationship with censorship has been absolutely wild from day one. There's an entire archive of Family Guy scenes that were deemed too controversial for broadcast television. One episode had a joke about the September 11th attacks that was removed before airing, and another had a sequence involving Mickey Mouse that Disney's lawyers shut down faster than you could say copyright infringement. The writers have always pushed boundaries, sometimes successfully, and sometimes not so much. Here's where things get really interesting. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons, and Fox executives thought that was the end of it. But something unprecedented happened in television history. The show found a massive second life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim programming block. The DVD sales were so strong that they actually outsold many primetime dramas that were still on the air. This success story became a case study in how a show could resurrect itself through alternative distribution methods. The fan campaign to bring the show back was unlike anything television had seen before. This was before social media as we know it today, so fans organized through message boards, early blogs, and even physical petitions. They sent thousands of letters to Fox executives, and some fans even sent baby bottles and diapers as a reference to Stewie. The campaign worked, and in 2005, Family Guy returned for a 4th season, making it one of the first canceled shows to be revived due to fan demand and DVD sales. But then lightning struck twice, and the show was canceled again in 2002 and brought back again in 2005, making it the first show in television history to be canceled and revived twice. This second cancellation and revival story is even more dramatic than the first. The show's ratings had dipped during its 3rd season, and Fox executives felt it had run its course. However, the DVD sales for the first 3 seasons were so astronomical that they couldn't ignore the numbers. The voice acting process for Family Guy is absolutely fascinating and different from most animated shows. Unlike many animated series where actors record their lines separately, the main Family Guy cast often records together in the same room. This creates a more natural flow of dialogue and allows for improvisation that you can sometimes hear in the final episodes. Seth MacFarlane has said that some of the funniest moments in the show came from spontaneous interactions during these group recording sessions. One of the most mind-blowing facts about the show involves the famous chicken fight scenes between Peter Griffin and Ernie the Giant Chicken. These elaborate fight sequences, which can last several minutes, actually cost more to animate than entire episodes of some other animated shows. The animators have to create detailed fight choreography, multiple background locations, and complex character movements. MacFarlane has joked that these scenes are his way of burning through the show's animation budget in the most entertaining way possible. The show's cutaway gags, which are basically mini-sketches that interrupt the main storyline, weren't originally part of the show's format. They were added during the 2nd season as a way to incorporate more jokes and references that didn't fit naturally into the main plot. These cutaways became so popular that they essentially became the show's signature style, influencing countless other animated comedies that followed. Family Guy has had some absolutely incredible celebrity guest stars over the years, but many people don't know about the ones who almost appeared but didn't. Michael Jackson was reportedly interested in doing a voice on the show in the early 2000s, but legal complications prevented it from happening. Similarly, several A-list actors have recorded guest appearances that were later cut from episodes due to various reasons, from scheduling conflicts to content concerns. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond just entertainment. Family Guy references and memes have become part of everyday internet language. Phrases like, "that really grinds my gears," and "giggity" have entered the cultural lexicon. The show has been referenced in academic papers about humor, animation, and cultural commentary. Some universities have actually used Family Guy episodes as case studies in media studies courses. Here's something that might keep you up thinking about it. The show has predicted several real-world events with uncanny accuracy. There's an episode from 2005 that jokes about Kevin Spacey in a way that seems eerily prescient given later revelations about the actor. Another episode made jokes about certain political figures that seemed outlandish at the time but became remarkably relevant years later. Whether these are coincidences or the writers having incredible insight into human nature is up for debate. The international versions of Family Guy are absolutely wild and worth exploring if you're curious about cultural adaptation. The show has been dubbed into dozens of languages, and each version has had to navigate different cultural sensitivities and humor styles. The German version, for example, had to completely rewrite many jokes because direct translations didn't make sense or weren't funny in that cultural context. Some countries have banned certain episodes entirely while embracing others. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons has been fascinating to watch evolve over the years. Initially, there was definitely some tension, with Simpsons creator Matt Groening making pointed comments about Family Guy being derivative. However, this led to one of the most brilliant crossover episodes in animated television history, where the two families actually met and interacted. The production of this crossover episode required unprecedented cooperation between two different animation studios and networks. Behind the scenes, the Family Guy writing room operates differently from most television shows. The writers often compete to see who can come up with the most outrageous or offensive joke, with the understanding that most of these will never make it to air. This competitive atmosphere has created some of the show's most memorable moments, but it's also led to some jokes that had to be completely rewritten or abandoned during the production process. The show's approach to social and political commentary has evolved significantly over its run. Early episodes were primarily focused on absurd humor and pop culture references, but later seasons began incorporating more direct political satire and social commentary. This evolution has been both praised and criticized, with some fans preferring the original format and others appreciating the show's willingness to tackle serious topics through humor. MacFarlane's decision to step back from day-to-day involvement in the show after several seasons was a turning point that many fans noticed. His reduced involvement allowed other writers and producers to put their stamp on the show, leading to subtle but noticeable changes in humor, style, and character development. This transition period created some of the most experimental episodes in the show's history. The merchandising empire that Family Guy has built is absolutely staggering. From action figures to clothing lines, from video games to board games, the show has spawned an entire industry of products. Some of the most interesting merchandise includes items that reference the show's most obscure jokes, suggesting that the creators understand their audience's deep knowledge of the series. As we wind down our journey through these fascinating Family Guy facts, it's worth reflecting on how this show that almost never existed became such a cultural phenomenon. From sleeping on couches to creating a multi-million-dollar franchise, from cancellation to resurrection, from controversy to cultural impact, Family Guy represents something unique in entertainment history. The show continues to evolve and surprise audiences, and who knows what wild facts we'll be sharing about it in another 20 years. Sweet dreams, and remember, somewhere out there, Seth MacFarlane is probably working on another joke that will either make you laugh until you cry or shake your head in disbelief. Possibly both at the same time. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and you stumble across something so unexpectedly fascinating that you forget you were even tired? Well, tonight, we're diving deep into the chaotic, bizarre, and surprisingly complex world of Peter Griffin from Family Guy. And trust me, by the time we're done unraveling his entire story, you'll understand why this seemingly simple cartoon dad is actually one of television's most intricate characters. Most people think they know Peter Griffin. Fat guy, drinks beer, fights a giant chicken, right? Wrong. What if I told you that Peter's backstory involves multiple identities, time travel, alternate dimensions, and a family tree so twisted it makes soap operas look straightforward? What if I told you that this bumbling father figure has actually died and been resurrected more times than most comic book heroes? Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, let me paint you the complete picture of Peter Griffin's existence, from his mysterious birth to his countless near-death experiences and everything in between. Because once you see the full scope of his story, Family Guy will never look the same again. Let's start at the very beginning, because Peter's origin story is far more complex than you might imagine. Peter Justin Griffin wasn't always a Griffin. He was born Peter McFinnigan in Mexico, though the circumstances of his birth are shrouded in mystery and contradiction. His biological father, Francis Griffin, was an ultra-religious Irish Catholic man whose stern demeanor would later shape much of Peter's rebellious adult personality. But here's where things get interesting. Peter spent his early childhood believing he was Irish, embracing this identity with the kind of enthusiasm only a child can muster. However, his world was turned upside down when he discovered through a series of revelations that his heritage was far more complicated than he ever imagined. The man he thought was his father figure, Francis, represented everything Peter would grow to rebel against: rigid religious doctrine, conservative values, and an inability to express joy or spontaneity. This early trauma of identity confusion would follow Peter throughout his entire life. Think about it. How many episodes revolve around Peter discovering something new about his past or his identity? It's not coincidence. It's the fundamental driving force of his character. He's constantly searching for who he really is, because his foundation was built on uncertainty. Peter's adoption by the Griffin family brought him to Rhode Island, specifically to the fictional town of Quahog. Now, Quahog itself is practically a character in Peter's story. This small New England town serves as both his sanctuary and his prison. It's where he's built his adult life, but it's also where he's trapped in cycles of behavior that prevent him from growing beyond his teenage mentality. The Griffin household on Spooner Street became Peter's universe, and understanding the dynamics of this home is crucial to understanding Peter himself. His relationship with his adoptive family shaped his approach to his own family later in life. The lack of a strong father figure during his formative years explains so much about his parenting style with his own children. Speaking of his children, let's talk about Peter as a father, because this is where his story becomes truly complex. Meg, Chris, and Stewie Griffin represent three different aspects of Peter's own personality reflected back at him. Meg embodies his insecurities and need for acceptance, which is why he treats her so harshly. He's rejecting the parts of himself he dislikes most. Chris represents his simple, well-meaning nature, which is why Peter can sometimes be genuinely caring toward him. And Stewie? Stewie represents Peter's intelligence and ambition, the parts of himself he never developed or explored. The way Peter interacts with each child tells us more about his internal psychology than any therapy session could. When he's cruel to Meg, he's being cruel to his own perceived inadequacies. When he's protective of Chris, he's protecting his own innocence. And when he's bewildered by Stewie, he's confronting the intellectual potential he never realized. Then there's Lois, and oh boy, is their relationship a masterclass in dysfunction disguised as sitcom comedy. Lois Peterschmidt Griffin comes from wealth and privilege, everything Peter never had growing up. Their marriage represents Peter's ultimate conquest. He managed to win over someone completely out of his league, but it also represents his greatest fear, that he's not worthy of love or success. Peter's constant need to prove himself worthy of Lois drives many of his most outrageous schemes and adventures. Every time he starts a business, learns a new skill, or attempts to become famous, he's really trying to prove that Lois was right to choose him. The fact that she stays with him despite his countless failures isn't just comedy gold, it's the foundation of Peter's entire worldview. Now let's talk about Peter's professional life, because his career history reads like a resume from an alternate dimension. He's worked at a toy factory, been a fisherman, tried his hand at entertainment, and held countless other jobs. Each career change represents Peter's ongoing search for his true calling, his desperate attempt to find something that gives his life meaning beyond just being a husband and father. The Pawtucket Patriot Brewery isn't just where Peter works, it's where he found his tribe. His friendship with Glenn Quagmire, Cleveland Brown, and Joe Swanson represents the family he chose for himself. These relationships are arguably the most stable and consistent in his entire life. While his family relationships are complicated by obligation and expectation, his friendships exist purely because he enjoys these people's company. But here's what's fascinating about Peter's friend group: they're all fundamentally broken in their own ways, just like him. Quagmire's hypersexuality, Cleveland's passive nature, and Joe's physical limitations all serve as mirrors for different aspects of Peter's own struggles with masculinity, ambition, and physical insecurity. The infamous chicken fights with Ernie the Giant Chicken deserve special attention because they represent something deeper than just absurd comedy. These epic battles symbolize Peter's relationship with obstacles in general. Instead of finding reasonable solutions to problems, Peter's instinct is to meet challenges head-on with disproportionate force and stubbornness. The chicken fights are metaphors for how Peter approaches every conflict in his life, with excessive energy, poor planning, and a refusal to back down even when he's clearly outmatched. Peter's death and resurrection experiences are another crucial element of his story that often gets overlooked. He's technically died multiple times throughout the series, only to return as if nothing happened. These deaths aren't just reset buttons for the show. They represent Peter's resilience and his refusal to let anything, including mortality, keep him down. Each resurrection reinforces his belief that he's somehow special, somehow protected, which feeds into his often reckless behavior. The alternate timeline and dimension episodes reveal even more about Peter's character. When we see versions of Peter from different realities, we're seeing the paths his life could have taken under different circumstances. Some versions are more successful, others are more tragic, but they're all recognizably Peter at their core. This suggests that regardless of circumstances, certain aspects of his personality are fundamental and unchangeable. Peter's relationship with authority figures throughout the series follows a consistent pattern that traces back to his complicated relationship with his biological father, Francis. Whether he's dealing with his boss, Mr. Weed, later Angela, or any government official, Peter's default response is rebellion. He can't help but challenge authority, not because he has a well-reasoned philosophical objection to hierarchy, but because authority reminds him of the rigid control he experienced in his early religious upbringing. His various business ventures and get-rich-quick schemes reveal Peter's deep-seated belief that success should come easily. This isn't just laziness. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how achievement works, likely stemming from his upbringing where religious doctrine promised rewards for faith rather than effort. Peter applies this same magical thinking to business, relationships, and personal growth. The running gags and catchphrases that define Peter aren't just comedy elements, they're coping mechanisms. His nigh-he-he-he laugh, his random pop culture references, and his tendency to break into song are all ways he deflects serious, emotional moments. Peter uses humor as a shield against having to confront the deeper issues in his life. Peter's body image and relationship with food tell another important part of his story. His weight isn't just a visual gag. It represents his relationship with comfort and self-control. Food is Peter's primary source of comfort, his go-to solution for stress, boredom, and emotional pain. His eating habits are directly tied to his emotional state, which is why dramatic moments in his life often involve food in some way. The flashback episodes that show Peter at different ages reveal how his core personality traits were established early and have remained remarkably consistent. Young Peter displays the same impulsiveness, the same need for attention, and the same difficulty with authority that define adult Peter. This consistency suggests that Peter's behavior isn't really about his circumstances. It's about deeply ingrained patterns of thinking and responding to the world. Peter's occasional moments of genuine wisdom and insight are perhaps the most revealing aspects of his character. When he drops his usual antics and speaks from the heart, we see glimpses of the person he could be if he wasn't so afraid of being vulnerable. These moments are rare, but they show that Peter's intelligence and emotional capacity are much greater than his usual behavior suggests. His relationship with popular culture and media consumption reflects modern society's relationship with information and entertainment. Peter absorbs pop culture references without really understanding their context or meaning, much like how many people today consume information. He's a character designed for the internet age, even though he was created before social media existed. The international episodes where Peter travels to different countries reveal his American-centric worldview, while also showing his capacity to adapt when forced out of his comfort zone. These adventures don't fundamentally change him, but they do show that he's capable of growth when his usual coping mechanisms aren't available. Peter's various nemeses throughout the series, from the chicken to his own father to random authority figures, all represent different aspects of his internal struggles. He's not really fighting these external enemies. He's fighting parts of himself that he can't accept or integrate. As we wrap up this deep dive into Peter Griffin's complete story, it's important to recognize that his character represents something universal about the human experience. We all struggle with identity. We all rebel against aspects of our upbringing. We all fear that we're not worthy of the love we've received, and we all use various coping mechanisms to avoid confronting our deepest insecurities. Peter Griffin isn't just a cartoon character. He's a mirror reflecting our own struggles with adulthood, responsibility, and self-acceptance. His story is ultimately about someone trying to figure out how to be a good person despite being fundamentally unprepared for adult life. And in that struggle, we see ourselves. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching random comedy sketches. You're witnessing the ongoing saga of a man wrestling with the same questions we all face. Who am I really? Am I good enough? And how do I build a meaningful life when I feel completely overwhelmed by the complexity of existence? Sweet dreams. And remember, we're all just trying to figure it out as we go along, just like Peter Griffin.